Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing? It's I think we're on the third last, or we're almost there till the end of the day and until wine, I heard. So yeah, hope you stay with us for the next half hour. So I'm Samantha. I'm the founder of Yap Global, and I'm very excited to be joined by a diverse and amazing panel that is doing work in Web3 in all different aspects. Let's kick it off with some introductions and what each of you do to serve the Web3 industry. So do you want to start, Steve?
Yeah? Sure. Steve Munford. I'm the chief executive at Trulioo, and we're an identity platform. So as it relates to Web3 or crypto platforms or payments, we help establish trust. That can be for a variety of reasons, but increasingly it's for regulations, but really to help facilitate transparency, trust, eliminate fraud between transactions.
Hi, my name is Michael Carter. So I'm here on behalf of WorkDAO, and I actually do two things in Web3. So on the kind of more fun and whimsical side, I'm one of the creators of Storyverse, which is a NFT platform for storytelling. And we're sort of pre-launch, but you can check us out. And then on the sort of extreme opposite side, I'm the chairman at WorkDAO, where we are a token and employment compensation platform. So for all of those DAOs and Web3 companies that are trying to figure out how to hire people all over the world and compensate them in tokens in different forms, we're the solution to that, to the many problems that arise from trying to achieve that.
Hi, everyone. This is Sendi Young, Managing Director of Europe at Ripple. I come from a payments background, MasterCard previous 5 years, HSBC before. And at Ripple, essentially what we do is we help companies move money in a more efficient way, faster, cheaper, transparent way across borders using crypto and blockchain technologies, and eliminating the need for those standards to park capital around the world, and therefore releasing a lot of capital and making things more efficient and allowing them to invest to grow their businesses. At Ripple, we are now a 10-year-old company in crypto space. That's a very long time. And we're very fortunate to have seen almost this evolution of the space, and specifically payments use case coming from a kind of more hypothesis to piloting and really as a proven solution. So I'm really excited to talk a bit more later around how we see this and how that's been working out.
Hello everyone, I'm John V. I'm not an enterprise. I guess I'm the one consumer guy on the panel. So I run a company called Napster. Did anyone use Napster back in the day? Hey, it's still there. So this is a 21-year-old t-shirt. It has been washed in the last number of years. So I worked on Napster 21 years ago when I was at Bertelsmann. We lent them money and tried to get them to be legitimized, which would have killed Spotify and other ones, and the world would be different. But we were the original kind of decentralized Web3 brand before Web3 was a glint in anyone's eye. We were decentralized. It was all about empowering the creator and doing things differently. Anyway, so since then I worked in the music business and advertising and television, and most recently at Roblox. And then joined Napster a few months ago. So we're trying to, as I heard from a lady, like blow shit up again in the music industry and change the model away from what's been a fairly, boring, non-exciting streaming industry for the last 20 years, and empower the artist at the center of the experience and leveraging the best of Web3 silently in the background to bring this to the mass market away from kind of the shadows.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. So by way of introduction, just for me, so Yap Global, we're a PR agency that helps Web3, DeFi and crypto companies tell their stories. And so I'm looking at it on an angle of, what's, interesting in the space. Some of our clients are, DAOs like ENS domains. So they're like on the spectrum of Web3, trying to do it organically. So I'm going to be kind of learning from each of the panelists, today on where we're at, because the title of the panel is Looking Ahead. What are the challenges, and what are the opportunities that we see? So let's do a stock take. Let's let's start with where we are right now. It's been an interesting 48 hours in the crypto industry, as some of you may have, read in the news or followed on Twitter. And so it's and Web3 is kind of interlinked with the activity with what's happening in crypto as well, because it's kind of it underpins the growth. However, there's the Web2 industry that's in the last few months started to take interest and have Web3 strategies like Disney, like Starbucks, collaborating with Polygon. So I just want to hear from the panel, what's your assessment of the state of, Web3 development today? Where are we? And what needs to be done? So Steve, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So we've been around for 10 years. We've been working on this identity challenge We've been around for 10 years. We've been working on this identity challenge for the last 10 years. And Web 2.0 had the same challenge. Like, if everything goes digital, how do you solve the problem of establishing trust and doing trust and safety in a world where there's 7 billion people that you may want to access, and each one may not have a identity or be able to verify themselves digitally? So we've been working on that platform, again, for the 10-year journey. I think when it comes to Web3 and players like crypto or payments, it's the same challenge, right? There's no one infrastructure you can go to verify someone, really is who they are. And increasingly, as regulation comes, as people look for more trust and to avoid fraud, again, that layer's got to be built. And I think it's early days, still early days in Web 2, but I think it's also early days in Web 3. But I think the most interesting thing is Web3 provides some really interesting, as a platform, interesting ways to let users control their identity, let them manage their identity, and manage their trusted relationships, which I think is it's quite exciting.
Thanks. Michael?
So I guess we'll go in order. So the news recently, I think, highlights this trend that's really coming to a head. And it's sort of a conflict of ideologies and like people who on the one side are, you kind of have this idea of crypto as, this anarchist movement or this movement kind of away from traditional finance and governments and things like that. And then you kind of have this other side of it, which is like all the regulators saying, hey, wait, hold on, we got to understand this, we got to get a hold of it. And I think that we're sort of seeing right now just like such starkly different kind of worldviews and like lived experiences on both sides. And it's really highlighted then when you look at something like this recent FTX thing where on the one hand, a lot of people are like, hey, I'm in crypto, like I'm not here to pay taxes, and what are you talking about? And then kind of the same people are like, wait a second, like, where's the government when my centralized exchange disappears? And so what I think we're gonna see in the future is actually basically two separate paths. I think you'll have the like true decentralized, sort of, if it's not your key, it's not your wallet, it's not your crypto. Maybe even these groups that don't use their identity, and I think like getting to that kind of standard of decentralization and anonymity is really hard. Very few people will get there, and like the people who do that and decide to toe that line, like they'll be able to invent all sorts of interesting futures that they're just hard to do in the regulated world. And then the other, I think, honestly, like 99.5% or more will just live in the regulated world. And I think people will pay their taxes and people will have one-for-one, sort of reserves in their exchanges, and, there'll be KYC and things like this. And I think that's okay and that's good. I think the people who really want to live in that kind of world outside of regulation, they'll have to work hard to do it, and they'll be able to. And I think for everyone else, there'll be a lot more predictability and a lot more certainty. But it's going to be clearly a bit of a rocky road till we get to those two realities.
Sendi?
Yeah, I mentioned obviously we've been focused very much on cross-border payments. I think when I think about sort of where we are, I think two things stand out, right? One is I think we've come a very long way in the development. It's certainly in the last sort of 10, 14 years, if you think of from that horizon. It is the fastest adoption of technology that we've seen in history. But at the same time, when we're just at the beginning of it becoming more mainstream. I don't think it's yet mainstream, and we're at the early inklings. And when I look at sort of as an example of, for example, Ripple's experience, as I mentioned, sort of we've been around 10 years. Really in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, the payments network, the crypto enablement, the adoption of that, acceptance of having a cross-border payment solution where you have XRP, the digital asset, the native digital asset on the XRP ledger, XRP in your payments flow. It does deliver the cost and real-time settlement and all of those great benefits. But even maybe 4 years ago, speaking to banks, traditional finance companies, it was a non-conversation opener for 99.9 of them, right? It was too abstract, too risky, and we have come a long way where now we see a lot of those traditional finance companies coming to us and saying, well, we do want to get into, there is something there, we can see it, we can't yet touch it and feeling, and maybe we don't know where to start. Obviously, everybody is on different scale, but let's talk through it because we know you've been, in it for 10 years, working with the ecosystem from the beginning, right? I think it was very interesting when you mentioned kind of this original ethos. We've seen a massive change in terms of that. When initially when Bitcoin started on the back of the financial crisis, etc., it was very revolutionary. It was about let's throw the we don't want to trust governments, we don't want to trust banks. It's a new alternative system. That there's definitely something sort of valuable in there, but at the same time, I think Ripple's vision has always been this is not a throwing something out. It's an evolution. Let's build this change together. Let's take advantage of all the great benefits and improve. And I think in the last maybe 18 months, we've seen that taking a hold. Despite the winter, crypto winter, macro environment, seasons change, all of this unfortunate and sad and all these disruptions we're seeing. Despite that, you still see a lot of big names constantly coming out and launching new initiatives, new adoption of digital assets. So I think we cannot ignore both sides are the reality of this space. So I'm absolutely, truly inspired by where kind of RippleNet has come from, completely from scratch to processing about over $15 billion of volume. But if you look at the cross-border payment space, that's still very tiny, right? So there's a lot more room to grow, a lot more to do. And I'm very excited to be in this space, sort of to be part of driving that change and that adoption going forward.
John.
So I'm relatively new to quote unquote Web3. I was a metaverse guy for the last 3 or 4 years, and we kind of looked at the Web3 party. We had a pretty good party going on. Zuck blew up the party very recently. That's a separate story. So the metaverse was going well, and kind of I was a bit wary of Web3. It seemed to be this other movement that was crypto, that was rebranded as Web3. And then, some people, when Meta was rebranded from, or Facebook to Meta, it all kind of got glommed in Metaverse and Web3 together. So my observations, I took the job a couple of months ago, and I've been around the world and back, is that, first of all, the Metaverse crew is still very separate to the Web3 crew, and then Web3 is kind of separated into DeFi and trading, which is very much over here. What I'm interested in terms of Web3 is actually building material new consumer businesses with blockchain technology, which is Web3. So I'm not in the trading side, I'm in the building new businesses, which is what we're trying to do at Napster. So I think there are some learnings from the metaverse, so the metaphor I've been giving recently, if you think about Roblox, if anyone has kids, nieces or nephews, and has given out Robux. So if you think about Roblox as an L1 focused on gaming, right, to transfer the metaphors, we had 1 million plus developers building on Roblox. The entire, everyone can correct me afterwards, but the numbers I've heard for the entire Web3 ecosystem, there's between 5,000 and 10,000 active real developers after a decade. So that's an issue. And then in terms of tokens that are in usage or currency, we had Robux. It wasn't a full on-chain, but it was kind of a virtual currency. People didn't cash out their Robux. All the developers were using it. They paid each other. They used it for advertising. A whole bunch of new jobs were created. There were all these amazing use cases that were created in the community. And it was so consumerized that you could get the currency at the equivalent of Boots or Walgreens or whatever, or Amazon. And the demographic that used it preferred it to cash. So I think that's my optimism, I think, coming from the metaverse. I've seen it. People are like, what could the future of Web... So I've seen it already, and it's amazing. And I think the transition, a lot of, on the consumer space, the NFTs have a horrible I think, brand association now. So I think there's a consumerization, which I'm excited about coming in 2023, where a lot of the chatter in the last 30 days of people are like, yeah, we don't talk about no jargon. We've got to talk about everything that just happens in the back end, and the end user doesn't necessarily know it's happening, but it's in it bringing all this innovation in the back end. That's really cool, and it's not an investor thing. I think a lot of the projects, NBA Top Shot, with an average ARPU of like, $3,000. I haven't got $3,000 to spend on that, but like at Roblox, we had millions and millions of fans paying $1, $2, $3, or $5. So I think as we transition in 2023 to more consumer adoption, where it's away from kind of a smaller investor set who are using these new items almost as trading assets and not as fans, to more consumerized businesses. Advertisers also, you're going to see a lot of advertisers coming in. There was a campaign with Vatem a few weeks ago around the World Cup, and they're on 250 million crisp packets with Frito-Lay around the World Cup, where you download a wallet, and then you could maybe win tickets to the World Cup. So I think that the consumerization, where you don't feel, we were chatting before, shouldn't matter to the consumer, but if there are efficiencies that you can realize on the back end, whether it's money transfer or KYC or whatever it happens to be, that's happening in the back end to make ecosystems more efficient, or in our case, we think connecting artists and fans to allow them to make more money, connect with their end users, control their audiences more directly, and not be capped in the music industry with the $9.99 or $10.99 subscription, but unlock that fandom. That, I think, is the exciting thing. So definitely challenges, but optimistic about 2023.
Thanks, John. I like the point you make about no jargon. Reddit launched collectibles I think 2 weeks ago, and they didn't use any jargon. It's technically NFTs, but they never use the word NFT. So I like that, no jargon, no crypto jargon, no technical words. I think that's going to help with, educating people about, the potential of Web3. And speaking of opportunities, I also like the point, Michael, you made, how there are two different worlds forming. There's the people who are growing it kind of organically in decentralized autonomous organizations, in DAOs, but then there is a need for the established Web 2 companies, as well as financial institutions that have the money coming in that need it to grow. So let's talk about the opportunities specifically in terms of case studies for each of your respective fields, like in the KYC space, payments. So yeah, what are the opportunities you're seeing?
Yeah, a couple of points that were brought up, and Michael, I think you said it really well, which is there's going to be a portion of Web3 that holds its roots and is pure, but there's also a portion that wants it to be mainstream and accepts the regulations that need to come and the security that come with that. I personally think payments and transforming how payments are done is one of the things. I'm not as familiar with the consumer tech, but one of the challenges or opportunities that I think leads to more mainstream adoption of Web3 technologies. Because if you just look at the cost per transaction, the amount of cross-border transactions that exist, and the efficiency that can be brought to bear by people like Ripple, I think there's real gain there, and I'm quite optimistic. And I think about, at a very basic level, if you have say an immigrant worker living in one country needing to move money back to their home country, the amount of tax and overhead that they have on them by moving it through a traditional finance mechanism, it's actually quite punishing. And I think if Web3 can solve those problems, there's a huge global good for that. And I think our role in that is really to help with that identity part, to help establish trust, help establish transparency, and allow these new pieces of infrastructures to solve real problems en masse. And I think that gets pretty exciting.
I mean, to complement on that, Sendi, do you want to touch on the payment side with what Ripple's doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Steve sort of described the opportunity super well. That's exactly where we see, right? I mean, if you think about it, the current financial infrastructure was created before the internet was created, right? So obviously there's been a lot of amendments and updates and this and that, tweaks made, but the reality is it is not really fit for purpose to the way we live today, which is a lot more digital, right? Like it's on demand, at the click of our fingers, global, So we need a different way, a more native way of moving value across the world that is more suited to how we live and trade and entertain and do all these things digitally today. And I think that's what really excites me around adapting, creating this infrastructure that is, fit for purpose for what we're trying to do, which will also enable a lot more other B2B and consumer and other sort of applications. And that's where, we've been sort of investing in that infrastructure. I think from an opportunity perspective, I want to sort of bring in the topic around regulation, right, is absolutely critical and at the heart of it, and obviously has been a very, very hot topic in this space over the last year. Without clear regulation that sets boundaries but also protects consumers and doesn't stifle innovation, it's not possible, I think, for the full opportunity and potential for the sector to flourish. I think there's always going to be a spectrum of like very decentralized to somewhere centralized. I don't think we're ever going to be in this black and white world of everything centralized or decentralized. So I think there is a role for regulation to play to bring that sort of confidence to the everyday user that wants nothing, to your point, right? They don't want anything to know. They don't need to know anything about technology. A lot of our customers are payment service providers, right, to enable these remittances. They're so happy that we abstract out crypto, blockchain, the Filipino workers sending money here to their family in the Philippines. They have no idea there is XRP or blockchain and they don't need to. All they know is money is there on time. They're, saving, pretty much all of the money. Maybe a tiny fraction is gone. And this money is there in a transparent way. So I think that's the important thing. It's not technology for technology's sake, but it's what is the problem it's solving? How are we delivering that? And I think as companies building in this space, our job is to abstract out that sort of technology and really focus on the benefits to the user, be it consumer or the companies.
Yeah, and I think, when I was at AT&T, I think I see a lot of, for any OG mobile people, I see a lot of similarities between the old mobile ecosystem days and, metaverse and Web3 and blockchain now. So some people remember, we had disconnected mobile networks back in the day, where in America, I live in the States, you couldn't text your friend on T-Mobile, and if he was on Verizon, you couldn't connect with your people, which seems crazy now. And the innovation, again, from the music industry or IP holders on the web, everything was getting stolen. And then the mobile innovation was to allow things to be purchased on a microtransaction basis, using carrier networks to be put on carrier billing. So it was serving problems. One of my first projects at AT&T was cross-border payments for that, and we had the Filipino use it. That's the thing. So it feels like everything old is new again. And I think if we can really focus, now more consumer people, it feels, are coming into the space. If we really focus on either brand use cases, a lot of the brands now can't reach their consumer due to what Apple's doing. So they need to find a new way, which is a wallet is a great way to reach your end consumer and engage them. That's a great use of Web3. That has nothing really to do with heavy technology. Wallets are relatively simple. They can be downloaded for different use cases, and then brands can have a direct relationship with their fans and provide value and engage them. So we were a sponsor of the Olympics 20 years ago with McDonald's, and it was the first mobile marketing campaign. We were on 500 million tray liners and Happy Meals, and it was the first short code. And I was just thinking that the Vatten one that just happened, with 250 million crisp packets, it's kind of repeating itself again. So I think if we can now all focus on great use cases, how do we get money to places where people can't get money transferred? And again, that Roblox reference, a lot of our developers were either young, so they didn't have bank accounts, and that's why they loved Robux and kept it in that currency, or they were unbanked, and they were in areas of the world where they couldn't, and they couldn't move it to people across the world in fiat. So it's these tangible use cases where creators want to create. They're generally either young, out of the ecosystem, so having a currency and tokens that are tangible for the creator economy, I feel is going to be the biggest on-ramp in the next, again, year, 2 years, 3 years, and then great use cases happening in the back end to allow things that we already know are happening to make more efficient. If you look at the rights ecosystem in the entertainment industry, especially music, talk about a business that wasn't created in the digital era. I mean, it's like super, super archaic how rights get paid. If there are any artists or people familiar, it's like a spaghetti soup. And it came out of very local businesses, almost like town to region, region to country, country to continent. So there are huge efficiencies that we can just realize with the technology thinking about improving things that don't have to be very sort of from the rooftop, decentralized, not decentralized, like just getting on and innovating and creating great experiences for consumers and more efficiency for companies.
Yeah, that's a good point. Michael? Yeah. Do you want to add on the opportunities for WorkDAO and what you do?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of use cases, I tend to look at like what's the big picture first. And when you look at Web3, I mean, I think one of the most exciting things that like everyone would agree on is like all the smartest people that I see all are either in Web3 or want to go to Web3. And so you look around at the talent, and it's always like, wait a second, like you go back through time through all the trends, and at one point all the smartest people wanted to like build hobbyist personal computers, and then you got Apple and Microsoft and whatever, and you kind of like look at like where are the smartest people going, and they're going to Web3. And so it's kind of interesting because like if you say you just got a new job like in HR and recruiting at a Web3 company, you literally have almost the opposite problem of like a traditional like tech company, where suddenly everybody wants to join your company. Everyone's excited to like leave big tech and leave their boring job. And so you're sort of like, great, wow, like the recruiting part is a lot easier. But then this other thing is like suddenly really hard, where it's like, well, hold on a second. We have a vesting token grant. We're paying people in native tokens, maybe plus some Ethereum. We're employing people all over the world. And then all the basic stuff that you just expect to work. It's like, go get your payroll provider, go get your kind of HR consultant, This stuff is just off the shelf. Suddenly it's not off the shelf. And so these people are like, who are in charge of this, are like, wow, I went from, feeling like I could never do my job because it was so hard to find talent, to almost the opposite. Here's all this talent, and I don't even know how to pay them in a way where they get like health insurance, or like they can pay their taxes, or they can even prove to their landlord they have a job, right? It's like, can you imagine as an individual trying to go to someone and say, hey, I want to rent this apartment. Here's my wallet. Like, there's a lot of Solana in there. Like, can I get something? And the answer is sort of like, what the heck are you smoking? Like, I might rent someone an apartment, personally me, if I had a room in my house, by looking at their wallet, but that's like the 0.001%. And so what's so interesting, I think, and the common theme here is there's all these details. It's like, what are the rails? Like, what is the basic way that you do things that like seemed easier in like the old way, call it the Web 2, the previous world, and suddenly it's like hard again. And all that blocking and tackling, and that includes compliance with regulation, like getting that done, like that's the hard work that people aren't really looking at. Like they look at the big picture, all the smart people want to move over. They don't look at kind of the details, which is like, okay, we got to build these layers. And so, one common thing here on this panel, I think, is like we're here building those layers. And I think that's why a lot of people are in the room today and why a lot of people are in Web3. And so for us, building the layer of like, how do you compensate your employees? How do you get them health insurance? How do you help them pay their taxes? It's not great, sort of like cocktail hour conversation, to be honest. Like, it makes me the most boring person in the room. But it's necessary work that enables an even faster flow of talent into the industry. And so that's where I get excited the most.
So I'm definitely, you're not boring. I think definitely that's on my hit list of things to do. And I think that's definitely a challenge to your point of like, I'm crossing over and we're setting up a foundation and we've got to set this up, and there's a lot of, it feels in the beginning like a lot of Cayman Island stuff. So I think that challenge, where there's a perception challenge and there's also sort of a logistics challenge, which is what you're solving. So I think it's not boring at all, and it is super necessary. But that's my point, where there's all this pent-up demand. People feel it's the right way. There's this momentum, but it's like allowing the on-ramp to be easy I want to hire a bunch of people. How do I do it? And it shouldn't be super complicated or feel a little dodgy or whatever people think. It should just be normal, and there should be the old brand equivalents as we're replacing a Spotify and the Netflix, so there'll be the new Netflix and the new version of, I can't remember all the hiring people that do in your space, but you're the new version of that. And they're just doing it more efficiently and effectively to serve the needs of the new industry. I love it.
Add to that?
No, I was going to say it's kind of this balance of trying to replicate that what exists in the current industries, like HR, taxes, all that kind of stuff. And it's more than that. It's trying to innovate on it to make it better in the Web3 world, right? So if I think about it from identity, how do we make it better, easier, more private, more distributed, so that when you move into the Web3 world and leverage it, you're not reliving the same challenges that exist in the Web 2.0. So
that's right. I think if it's not better, you shouldn't be doing it. But That's the point. But I think it's and some of it is the hybrid. So we're more of a hybrid. So we're taking an existing solution and moving people who are already getting an experience that they like in quote unquote Web 2 and bringing Web3 features in. So the question for the newbies is like, can you be net new, or are the old guys going to start innovating and doing the new stuff in their current business? So I think that's going to be interesting, of the net new versus the hybrid.
Yeah. I think that's a good kind of point there, because I think at this time right now that there might be a need for, there is a need for more of the Web 2 established companies to come in and bring in their users, bring in the kind of volume and also the quality of the work. For example, gaming. I think crypto, the more like native crypto developers, I'm not sure they're great at building games, to be honest. I think it might take a large gaming company with that experience and then launching it on Web3. But I think, all of you here are giving such grounded perspectives on we're early. There's definitely something here, but we need to lay the groundwork and build the foundations, and that's a really good place to be. We've got, I think, maybe 10 minutes or less for some questions from the floor. We'd love to hear from you guys. So does anyone have any questions? And I believe there's some mic people. Yep, there's a guy at the front right here.
Thank you.
Please say your name, what you do, and then, ask your question.
Hi, I'm Hans-Peter. I'm a marketing automation specialist. And I was wondering, considering what's happening with FTX, like let's say there's a scenario where more regulation is pushed. Would this, in the short term, make it much more difficult to actually have the speed of innovation that we have seen in the last couple of years, because there would be much more red tape than there is right now?
Who wants to take this? Michael? Go.
There's always this question about regulation. It's like, does it create a bunch of red tape that makes it hard to innovate? And I think we've seen this happen even in big tech. If you look at social media, there's a lot of much needed regulation around data privacy and things like that. But the result for anyone who's worked in those companies or worked with those companies, it sort of went from there's this one lawyer on the floor everyone knows, to this is a floor of lawyers, and where's the engineer, right? And I think, though, what a lot of people miss is that regulation, on average, tends to favor the incumbents and tends to work against, the people innovating. But I do think there's the potential that this might be a little bit different, and that right now, one of the issues is that there's no certainty, and I think it's not so much about what are the regulations. It's that as a retail customer, you have no certainty about what's going on with the exchange you're on, and as a company, if you have a token, you have no certainty about am I making a security or a commodity? It's sort of this is Schrodinger's coin. We won't know until the SEC looks at it 3 changes later in their administration. It's sort of nobody knows, and so that uncertainty, I think, is the biggest problem we have today. And we can see where the regulation comes down. Kind of it could be here or here or here, and those all have implications, right? But the thing that they all have in common is that it'll be a discrete place that then the rest of the industry can kind of build around. And so in any event, I do think that going from uncertainty to some certainty will be helpful.
Yeah, just on FTX, we spent a lot of time servicing the crypto industry, and what we've seen in evolution over the last couple of years is this kind of bifurcation of a lot of exchanges, and this relates to KYC, any money laundering, and transparency. Knowing that regulation is going to come and putting the infrastructure in place to be ahead of it and to build the transparency, to build the brand. And then you have a number of exchanges or a number of platforms that are avoiding it. And so the question is it going to slow down innovation? By definition, it slows down something. But the issue around innovation, if there can't be trust and transparency and usage, then there's nothing to innovate on. So I do think it's coming in a thoughtful way, and I think this will highlight a bunch of new either self-policing or new regulations that will come, but eventually it needs to come, but hopefully in a thoughtful way, in a collaborative way, and in a better way than has existed elsewhere.
I think on the topic of regulation, right, it's not binary like good or bad. It's really how the regulation comes into play and how it's created is extremely important, and that's the nuance that makes the biggest difference, right, in terms of how it impacts. So, if you look at, there's such a big, broad spectrum around the world, right? You have outright bans in China. You have in the U.S. regulation by enforcement. You have then the European MiCA, right, markets in crypto assets legislation, which is this, really landmark. It's a harmonized way of regulating the space in a very, relatively large jurisdiction that we have never seen anywhere else globally around the world, which I think is very, we applaud that effort, honestly. And then UK is kind of trying to catch up to that in a way, has the right intentions, but maybe a little bit slow, and with the whole political turmoil, maybe lost kind of the momentum to really act in it. But, I'm confident we'll get there. So you have this like whole spectrum, but I would even argue that I think when done right, in partnership with industry, with a focus on, again, protecting consumers, but not, creating that safety, security for people to be comfortable to get into the space, it can, I think, even like stimulate adoption of the space for your, again, average sort of consumer and companies. Banks, right? Banks are such an important part of the ecosystem. They do want to come in. Their risk management policies, practices, processes, they've all been created, obviously, in a very different regulatory environment. They do want to come in, but they have to make sure that the regulation is there and they're following it. So I think again, none of the companies, I think, can move alone. Like, this is an ecosystem play, and we're seeing the ecosystem evolve. But first and foremost, fundamentally, regulation done right can really unlock the crypto sort of utility to come in place.
Yeah, I think, not beating the dead horse, I think we're the same thing, but I think regulation can be the big unlock, right? Because there are a few people who are very comfortable building with no rules and kind of wild. There's this festival in the desert called Burning Man. It feels like it's the Burning Man movement. A lot of people, I would never go out there. There's no shop. I don't know what you mean. I can't pay for anything. It sounds crazy. But you get 80,000 people going to the desert and having fun and partying. So it feels like that's where at the moment, which gets a group of people. But in terms of really mainstreaming, I think to allow, if you have an idea for a business and you want to start it, basic ideas like Michael was saying, how can I hire people? It can't be that complicated. I don't want to get arrested. Like, what's all this offshore stuff? This seems crazy. Can I get... So there's basic stuff in terms of the operational side, but in terms of regulation, you don't really want to start a company and then, the Ripple is fighting the fight. I mean, it's a wild ride. So I think once that can get hopefully sorted out or have a little bit more clarity, I feel there's going to be a massive unlock where all those smart people who are already working in the space. I think there are 11,000 more smart people from Meta available as of yesterday. So I think there are a bunch of people who want to get in, and I think it's just demystifying and again de-jargoning and having a little bit more ground rules and regulation. Then I think there will be a massive, from 10 years, I think hopefully the innovation that we've had in 10 years can be replicated in a year, I think once the unlock happens.
No, that's interesting. I think, for some of the more like, Web3 natives or crypto natives, sometimes regulation is not top of their mind. But I like the way you put it, John, that it could be the great unlock if we really want to go mainstream, because everyone talks about mass adoption, but we need regulators to come along with that. Kind of got 2 minutes, so each person on the panel has 30 seconds. We've still got 2 more months for the rest of the year, but it's 2023 just around the corner. What are you all looking forward to seeing in 2023? John, we can, or Michael, start with you.
I'm just really excited to see what brings back the next cycle, right? Like in the last cycle, eventually no one knew. We kind of had a bear market, and then it was sort of like DeFi. And then it just came back, and the talent flooded in, and the money flooded in, and innovation happened. And I think what's so cool is it's going to be something. And it's probably something that's being built right now that we don't yet know what it is. It could be DAOs in a big way. I don't really know. But I'm just really excited to see it play out because, these cycles always happen, and it's going to be something really cool.
Yeah, I guess I have enough gray hair to think back to the dot-com boom, which... there's a lot of nonsense, but there's a lot of innovation, and the ones that came through that led innovations for 10 or 20 years. And I feel like we're going to see that again. I think there's a lot of innovation in Web3, a lot of real companies solving real problems, and I just look forward to this coming out of this kind of winter or this kind of cloud over the whole industry, and just seeing some of these really interesting, transformative companies, emerge, and I believe there's going to be transformation over the next 10 or 20 years again.
I have just 2 words: clear regulation. We've seen that, coming up to the agenda, but apart from MiCA, which I think is fantastic, UK, US, we still need to see that tangibly materializing. So that's what I would love to see.
Wait, could I ask, Micah, though, like bans, like foreign backing of stablecoins in Europe. So like, what happens to USDC? I want to see what happens there. Everyone who has USDC will know what to do. So to your point, though, I think there's going to be a coming, sort of conflict right away between regulation and real-world usage in just a few months.
And so again, if Metaverse is now part of Web3, a Metaverse prediction, I think, for next year, I think you're going to see some new platforms coming out that are more, let's call the open Metaverse, that will not be about scarce land and limited demos, and it will be fully open with reasonable commercial rates. And on the back of that, you'll see mass adoption across a kind of traditional Web3 and Metaverse of brands and advertisers, and I think that will start to drive a bunch of new companies. We haven't had new companies materially in the last few years, and mass adoption with these sort of wallet, where it's not really a wallet and people don't know about it. And then hopefully we'll also see, which we're gunning for, a consumer success in sectors like sports and gaming and music that people can point to going, oh, those guys have not like 200 users, but they have like a couple of million users, or there's a path to 10 million and 50 million. So I think I'm excited for 2023.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can everyone give Steve, Michael, Sendi, and John a round of applause as we look forward to the Web3 industry in 2023. All right. Thank you, guys.